Hello, friends. Okay, I see no one has joined yet, so let's wait for some time for others to join and then we'll start. Okay, I see some of us are joining in. Hello, hi Rohi.
Hello.
Okay, I think let's give it a start and then let's see how we can progress. Let the others join in. In the meanwhile, maybe we can give it a start. Give me 1 minute. Give me 1 minute. There's something. Okay, so I will share my screen. Okay. Can I get a confirmation, Rohit, that you are able to see my screen?
Yes, I can see.
Okay. So as of now, we have looked into the basics, right? We have looked into the basics of time series. We have looked into the components of time series, right? Just to reiterate, it was trend, seasonality, and cyclicity. Okay, these are the main components we saw. We also saw things like white noise or simply noise, or we can also call them the irregularity, larity, right? So these are the components that we have seen, right? These are some of the components, right, that we have seen. Now comes a stage where let's try to understand, okay? Let's try to understand how we can create a time series or how we can look into the most important part, which is the analysis of the time series. Now, before we start the analysis of the time series, just a quick reiteration, there are two kinds of methods that we are going to use, statistical methods, and there will be some, let's say, advanced methods, I'll say. Why I am saying this is because I can also say these are, let's say, the basic methods, and then I have the advanced methods. So basic methods are going to be similar to the statistical tests that we have done or we have seen until now. For example, they'll be similar to Z test or T test or the ANOVA and so on that we have seen earlier. And the advanced ones, right? The advanced ones are more going to be looking into patterns, right? I'll not use the word trend because trend is a different thing altogether. Now, before we start doing this analysis, one activity that we need to do, or you can say this can also be called as the prep or the preparation before you do any analysis, right? So what we need to do essentially is that we have to, and this is going to sound a bit weird, right? There will be questions. Okay, this is a bit weird. There will be questions. I completely understand if there are doubts in this part. The preparation is going to make the time series stationary. This is the basic prep that we need to do, other than the preparation steps that we have already seen earlier. For example, if we don't have continuous data, then we need to get the continuous data. For example, if I have daily data, then I should have daily data. There shouldn't be any losses in there. If I have weekly data, then all the weeks of data should be there. If I have monthly data or yearly data or let's say quarterly data, right, my data should be prepared properly. And the second thing that we have also discussed earlier is that I am really looking for volume based on the use case, right? Based on the, oh, I'm sorry, based on the use case that we are trying to solve, right? So for example, if my prediction horizon is as small as 6 months, right, then the volume of the data will be something. Let's say the volume of the data is X, and then I have a use case where I need to predict for the next 5 years, then I'll have another volume of the data which is, let's say, X bar, and obviously X in this case will be less than X bar, which we can really understand, because to predict something which is as big as for the next 5 years, we'll need more data as compared to if we are going to predict something for the next 6 months, right? But this is not always true. This is just intuitional. Okay? This is just intuitional. This is not really having any mathematical background. So ideal condition, what is the case? The volume of the data should be as big as we can collect, right? It is not the case that if we don't have big data, then we will not be able to do time series. We'll still be able to do. Then there will be losses, right? Or then there will be errors, which we'll have to live with. So now let's look into these uh, pattern finding things or statistical tests kind of things. But before that, we need to make the data stationary, right? Why we need to make the data stationary is because if I have trend in the data, for example, I have a time series, which is something like this, okay? And clearly I have some uptrend. Okay? So I have uptrend. If I have uptrend of the data, it is quite clear that this trend will make some changes, will make some effects, I'll say effects on the statistical distribution of the data. We'll come to know what I mean by this. We'll come to know over a period of time. This may not be entirely clear to you right now, but what I mean here is that this trend that I'm seeing over here, whether that is uptrend or downtrend, this can cause distortion. Okay, this will cause distortion more often than not, right? And I need to remove the distortion so that, and the intention why or the reason why I'm doing this removal is that then I will be able to see the seasonality and the cyclicity patterns, right? So what I mean by this is, let's say I have a time series which is looking like this, right? So clearly, if not cyclicity, at least I have seasonality and I have trend. So I have a clear uptrend and I have seasonality also, which you can see inside the sections like these. If I break this, what I mean by breaking, there is a mathematical term also, it is known as decomposition. So if I decompose my time series, right, and I'm able to remove, okay, I'm able to somehow remove the trend component, okay, from this, right, then what will happen is my decomposed time series of this is my original time series. My decomposed time series will be something like this. It will have, let's say, 3 parts. Okay, I can create a time series which is going to now have 3 parts. One part is only going to show me the trend, right? One part is going to show me the seasonality, and one part may show me the cyclicity. In this case, there is no cyclicity, so it will be something like this, right? So this component shows me the cyclic nature of the trend. This component shows me the seasonality of the trend of a time series, and this one shows me the trend of the time series. So in this way, what I'm doing in this decomposition activity, okay, what I'm doing in this decomposition activity is that I'm breaking my original time series into three different time series, so that by getting these kind of structures or by getting these kind of different graphs, now I will be able to perform different operations on them. For example, if you see, this is a straight line and I should be able to do regression or related operations on this line. If I have seasonality components like this, I'm going to show you what tests they are. I will be able to do statistical tests on them to find out the patterns, right? And the moment I'm able to find out the patterns, which is in mathematical format, okay, I'm not talking about the intuitional patterns like, okay, it is a summer season and hence I have more sales of ice creams and so on. It is fine, which because of our domain knowledge we are able to find. But if I'm not being able to put it into a mathematical format, how am I going to predict it at a later stage, or how am I going to estimate it? So to estimate it, I need a mathematical function, right? I anyways need a mathematical function. Now, how do we get a mathematical function? Is what we are going to do over here, right? So that's the first thing that we have to do, right? So that's the first thing that we have to do. We take a time series and we decompose, right? We decompose. Now, the most easy way to decompose this, right? The most easy way to decompose this is what is now, right? Point number one, what is now and what was earlier, right? What is the value now and what is it that earlier? So, for example, time. In this case, clearly one factor here is time. And of course, we are talking about the time series analysis. So, time plays a very, very important role. So, let me define time as t. If I look at my clock right now, it is 8:42, right? It is 8:42 p.m. IST, right? So I'll take t as this value. At, and if this is t value now, I can call this is t now, right? Or time as of now. Time at any given point at the past, which is just one unit behind it, or one unit behind the current time, right? Is going to be what? 20:41 p.m. IST. Let's say if my unit, okay, if my unit is merely the minutes, because you see here what is changing from this new value or current value and the old value, or the difference between the current value and the old value is just this number. This 2 has changed to 1, right? Which means only the minute part has changed, right? So this differentiation that I'm doing here, or the difference that I'm taking out over here, is basis the minute scale, right? I can also take it out in a second scale. I can also take it out in a day scale. I can also take it out in an hour scale, right? So just for the simplicity of understanding, I'm going to take this as a minute scale, let's say, right? Because this is easy for me to understand what is there at 20:42 and what is there at 20:41, right? Right. So let's say what is there at 20:42. Let's say a very hypothetical kind of a scenario. There are three people in this call or in this meeting in this session, right? At 20:41, there were only two people in the session. So clearly there has been a change. When we started the session, or when we were at 20:41 p.m. IST, only two students were there, right? Only two students were there. Now there are three students. So there has been some change. I can clearly say that there has been some delta. So I will be able to take this kind of a computation, right? I will be able to take this kind of a computation and find what is otherwise known as, in the time series world, what is otherwise known as the time difference, right? What is otherwise known as the time difference. In other words, what I'm going to do, I'm going to take the value of my variable x at t and minus the value at the time t minus 1. If I'm able to do this kind of a differentiation operation, this is a very simple, non-costly operation, right? Why I'm saying non-costly is because this is simple minus operation. This is not going to take too much of time complexity or space complexity, depending on how much data I have. So this is not going to be very, very powerful operation, which will need a lot of CPU and a lot of time to execute. So this becomes a very simple thing that I can do, right? This becomes a very, very simple thing that I can do, a very easy thing that I can do. And using this method, I can do a differentiation. This differentiation activity, right, that I just did is also known as detrending of the data, right? This activity is also known as detrending, right? Because merely by doing this, if I do this for all the points in my data, I will be able to remove the trend, right? I will be able to clearly remove the trend, right? How I do that, right, is that let's say I have my data which is x by y, right? I simply take the values which is over here, x1, x2, x3, y4, and so on and so forth. So these are my feature values. Okay, these are the features, right? In this case, this is simply going to be time, right? And with respect to time, I'm getting a value which is y1, y2, y3, y4, and so on, right? So there will be n values of x or a time, and there will be n values of y, which is my output variable. Let's say y is my sales and x is my day. So I'm trying to find out per day sales of something, right? Let's say I'm trying to find out the per day sales of the pencils that I am producing in my factory. Let's say I'm looking at the per day sales capacity of pencils that I'm producing in my factory, right? Now I can say that this one or two or three that I have written over here, even this n, these are instances. Okay, these are instances of time. At each instance of time, okay, at each instance of time, I have a value of y. So I can say at instance t1, I have a value y1. At instance t2, I have value y2. At t3, I have a value y3, and so on. If you say, or if we say that this x by y data, this x by y data is, let's say, order in the descending order of time. Okay, let's say, for example, just for example, if I have given it an order, obviously, as we have already discussed earlier, we are going to give some order to my data that I'm going to use in terms of the time series, because it needs to have an order. So if that order is, let's say, descending, right, then T1 is the latest time, right? This is the latest. This is the value Y1 is at the latest time T1, followed by what has happened at T2. So this is old, or this is, I can say, history, right? And then T3 becomes the history or old value for T2, and so on and so forth, right? Then at the end, it will be Tn. So this is like the initial value, right? This is like the starting value, right? So in this case, it is clearly, I think it is easier for you to understand that if I draw a line, right? So this is the direction in which basis time, right? The value of y is changing, right? Whether it is changing in the positive direction or in the negative direction, that is not really my concern. So I'm not trying to say whether yn is less than y1 or yn was greater than y1 or yn is almost equal to y1 and so on. These are not the considerations that I'm making. I'm only looking at the time. So because I've ordered it in the descending order, I can now get the previous instances and I can take the minuses. So I can take the delta here. I can take the delta over here. I can take the delta over here. And in this way, I can take the delta at each and every stage. If I take the delta of each and every stage and create my data set containing only the deltas, right? Then this delta's data can also be called the detrended data, right? Detrended data, because now I have removed the trend. If you do the math, you will come to know. You take any data which is order with respect to time. You can take any data. For example, you can go to sites like Condal, or you can go to sites like Kaggle, right? Or you can go to UCI machine learning, let's say, repository. You can take any data from there, which is a time series data. Okay, take any data which is like a time series data. And if you do this delta operation in any Excel sheet, right? So let's say these are two columns in your Excel sheet. You create a third column, which is my y1 minus y2, then a third column, which is y2 minus y3, y3 minus y4, and so on and so forth. The first value being blank because you don't have anything called y0. You will see that now if you take x, the first column, and the detrended column or the delta column, and you try to plot it, then the trend is gone. You will find different patterns. You will not see the trend anymore. You may see the seasonality. You may see the cyclicity, right? You may see the cyclicity, right? You may see the cyclicity. You may not see the cyclicity. You may see the seasonality, or you may not see the seasonality, but the trend will be gone. Why? Because I am taking a differentiation, right? I am taking a differentiation basis the independent variable, which is time in this case, right? So that is the first activity that we do, right? That's the first activity which we do. So clearly, what we have done is we have converted, we have taken our time series. I have taken my time series, any time series data I have taken. I have applied an operation which is detrending, right? I have applied an operation which is detrending, and I have made the data stationary. Okay, it's a very important interview question also. Why you do a time series conversion to stationary is because so that I can bifurcate, I can do the decomposition of the time series into patterns or into components like seasonality and cyclicity. Because as long as trend is there, and trend may or may not be there, by the way, so you will get it from the initial plot. The moment you get a time series, the first thing we do is we plot it, right? The moment we plot it, we get to know whether there is a trend or not. If there is a trend, then the trend is going to bring disruption. Okay, the trend is going to bring disruption to the visibility or to the mathematical aspects of the time series. That's why I'm breaking it. Also, later stage, I'll see that this is going to help me find out the noise. It's going to really help me figure out if there was any noise, especially if there was any irregularity in the data or not, right? So that's the first thing which we do. After we have done this, there are plethora of methods that we can use to analyze the time series. And what I mean by analyzing the time series is that after I have detrended it, I will be able to further analyze the time series. So let's say this is my time series data. I have performed the detrending. After I'm done with the detrending, I have got the multiple components, the decomposed components. For example, I've got the trend, right? I've got the seasonality, right? I've got the cyclicity. If at all there is a cyclicity, let's say there is none. So I've got the cyclicity, I've got the seasonality, I've got the trend. Now that I've got these, I will be able to apply the statistical methods that I was telling you. Now, if I want to look at the most important statistical methods, only the important ones. If I don't want to learn everything, I just want to concentrate on the most important or most used ones, then they are known as ETS and ARIMA, right? I'm not going to define what ARIMA is right now because I'll not understand what is ARIMA. I can define what is ETS because this is a pure statistical method, right? And it is also known as exponential smoothing. It is known as exponential smoothing. It involves a lot of statistical tests also. But what about this ARIMA thing? ARIMA thing is actually a derived component, I'll say. I can remark about ARIMA that it is actually a derived thing. It is not a pure metal. Okay, you cannot say that it is a pure metal. It does not exist in nature. It is created out of other metals. It is like things that we have learned into chemistry also in our school, that there are actually components, there are actually, let's say, chemical components, right? Like C1, let's say one is C1 and one is C2. If I'm doing an experiment and I'm able to somehow combine C1 and C2, then the chemical composition of C1 and C2 combined, let's say I'm doing a plus sign here, okay, combined is going to produce something which is C3, right? So ARIMA is just like this C3 thing over here. It is nothing pure. It is not pure metal. Okay, it is actually derived. It is actually derived from these chemical components like C1 and C2, from where I was able to derive C3, right? So to understand C3, obviously I need to know what is C1 and what is C2, right? So that's the reason why I'm not going to touch ARIMA right now. Let me finish C1 first, right? Let me finish C1 first, and then I'm going to talk about it. Okay. So what is exponential smoothing, or what are the methods that gives rise to exponential smoothing? But before I go in there, let me just ask you if there are any questions, if you have any doubts until this point in time.
No doubts as of now.
Okay. Okay. So let's talk about exponential smoothing technique, right? Now, exponential smoothing technique is basically a statistical modeling technique. It is a statistical modeling technique, which means we are going to perform some tests. And what essentially we are going to do is that we are going to take the past observations, right? And the only calculation that we are going to do is otherwise known as weighted average. Okay, we are simply going to calculate the weighted average, right? How this weighted average calculation is done is give more preference, okay, to what has happened recently. There's a small spelling mistake in this happened word, which you can please ignore. So this smoothing method or the statistical modeling method is going to take past observations as the input. Obviously, this I get from my time series data itself, right? Nothing fancy. And the calculation that it is going to do is going to be weighted average. I'll show you how the calculations are done. But ideal condition, it is going to forecast using the weighted average of the past observation. So my final objective, I can say, my objective is to forecast. Okay, this is why I am trying to learn all these things. Right? This is the reason why I'm trying to learn all the methods. So I'm going to do forecasting using weighted average, taking input as the past observations, giving, right, giving more weight or more preference, right, giving more weight or more preference to what has happened recently, right? For example, if I have 1000 data points and I am at the first data point or 1000th data point, let's say the value of t at 1000 is y1000, and then at value t 999 the value of y is 999, t 998 the value of y is 998. Obviously, in this way, if I go, I'll have some values like t497, where the value of y was, let's say, y497. At any given point in time, t497, value of y was 497. Now, this method of calculation of taking weighted averages, what it does is it gives more weight to y999 or y998, which I'm going to mark as asterisks, rather than y497, provided this is what I'm trying to forecast. So if I'm trying to forecast what is going to happen at y1000, the recent n number of observations, right? The recent n number of observations will get more preference, irrespective of what is the value of the time, right? I'm not going to be really considered about the value of the time because that is already there in my data. If I have got the past data, I know what is the value of T999 or until T999. Hence, I know what is going to be T1000, right? For example, if I have got data from 1st of January 2001, right, until 3rd of February 2021, right? Then I know what is going to be my next value, right? My next value obviously is going to be 4th of February 2021, given this data set is at the granularity of a day, right? And I will also assume that I have no missing data. If that is the case, then I know what is going to be the T1000 value, which is not really what I'm looking for. What I'm looking for is at T1000 or at 4th of February, what is going to be the value of Y? If I do ETS or if I do exponential smoothing of a time series, it's going to give me, by this calculation of the weighted averages, more preference. Okay, more preference will be given to these latest values as opposed to the old values, right? Because y497 is a very old value, right? So while calculating 4th of February 2021's y value or yi at this point in time, more of preference will be given to data values which are pertaining to February 2021 or January 2021 as opposed to let's say March 2009, right? How does these weights come into picture? This is what we are going uh, to find out, right? So what we are going to do is that it's not so easy, or over a period of time, the statisticians have also understood that it is not so easy to simply calculate a weighted average and then go ahead, because that will be really a foolish thing to do. That will be like if I'm going to take the value at T1000, which is Y1000, right? I can simply take the average. I can simply take the average of what has happened until now and I can predict this value. This value, then what is predicted is not going to be really very good because it will have components like cyclicity and the seasonality. Hence, whatever I'm finding out is really not going to be a very good value. So, what do I do in that case? How do I perform this weighted average activity at the first place? Right. So, to do that, let's try to see what components are a time series as, and accordingly, our strategy will be decided. So, what I mean by that is, let's say this is my time series, right? I'll try to say what components I have. If my component or if my time series is, let's say, case one, okay, case one, where the trend is constant, the trend, let's say, is equal to constant, right? And seasonality is none. Okay, there is no seasonality, right? And let's say cyclicity. Let me just see what is there in the chat window. Can you please adjust your mic volume has gone down? Is it clear now, Rohit? Let's see. Yeah, great. Okay. So let's say I have got my time series data, right? So case one is where trend is constant. So let's say trend is something like this, right? I have no seasonality. I have no cyclicity. In this case, it is very simple. I can take the average, right? I can literally take the average because it is making no sense for me to do any other calculations. You see, the trend is really constant and there is no other component also. So this kind of application or operation which we do over here is known as simple exponential smoothing, right? This is as simple as taking the average, right? But this is only useful if I'm going to do short-term forecast. Right? If I'm going to do short-term forecast, because looking at the previous data, there was no trend or the trend was constant and there was no seasonality, no cyclicity, but there is no guarantee the same thing is going to repeat in the future also. It may well be the fact that I do a prediction right now and then from tomorrow something has changed in the economic environment in my country or in the weather in my country, and hence the data now is going to start containing kind of an uptrend or a downtrend, or maybe some seasonality factor is introduced, some cyclicity is introduced, and so on. So I can never be sure what is going to come in the future. So I cannot fix this model, right? I cannot fix this model. It is just like you can try to compare what we learned in the machine learning area. For example, we took the data related to diabetes, if you remember, right? We took the data related to diabetes patients and we fit a lot of models like, let's say, decision tree, okay, random forest classifier. We have fit a support of vector machine and so on and so forth. Okay, let's say that this random forest classifier was my best classifier and I have selected this best classifier. All I do in this case, in this use case, is that I simply retrain my model. Okay, retrain the same model. Okay? I retrain my same model using new data. Okay, using new data at given intervals of time, right? Because the inherent pattern of my data is not changing so much, and I know that I have used enough history, enough historical data, and I have done a lot of things like grid search, cross validation, and so on and so forth. And I found out that random forest classifier is my best one. It is the best thing. So I have fixed this model. Are you getting my point? I have fixed the model. And then I have only retrained the model by giving it the new data, the new data, the new data, and so on and so forth. Right. So in this case, I cannot do that. In this case, I cannot do that because until now, in the previous, until now, I see the trend is constant. There is no seasonality. There is no cyclicity. All fine, right? But I don't know what is going to happen in the future. That's why I can only do short-term forecast. Let's not talk about anything more than that, right? I cannot do anything more than that in this case. What happens if I have case two? Let's say case two is where there is a trend which is either uptrend or downtrend, right? Some kind of trend is there in the data. Let's say either the data has a trend which is like this, or the data has a trend which is like this, and seasonality is not there, cyclicity is not there. So in this case, what is happening? At least I have trend. I have some information about what is going to happen in the future or what may happen in the future. What may happen with new data. So if I continue collecting this data for the next 6 months, I know there is a very high chance that the trend is going to continue, right? The fact that there is a trend is going to continue. I can't say whether it will be an uptrend or downtrend, right? For example, if this uptrend thing, let's say we take this example of uptrend of sales of, I don't know,
garments. Okay, garments from my offline shop. I don't have any website here. Okay, this is my offline shop. Okay, I have an offline shop, let's say in Calcutta or in Pune, right? There was an uptrend until this point in time, and this is, let's say, March 2020. We all know what has happened from March or April 2020. Because we are lucky, we are working in an IT industry, we started to work from home. But what about these guys who were selling garments using offline shops? They cannot do work from home. It was a complete lockdown. So maybe the trend has changed, and we uh, regain the position where after the pandemic we can again start the shops. Maybe it is going to have an uptrend. So until this point in time in the history, there was uptrend. Then we got downtrend. Then we again may get an uptrend. But in any case, irrespective of the type of trend, there is a trend. So if I'm sure there is going to be a trend, irrespective of whether it is an uptrend or a downtrend, I can use a method. Yeah, I can use a method which is known as Halt's exponential smoothing. Right? This method is developed by this person called Halt. So that's the reason why it has been given a name, which is Halt's exponential smoothing. Right? So case one is where trend is constant. Simply take, I can take the average and I can do short term kind of forecast. In this case also, in Hall's exponential smoothing also, I can say that I can do short to medium term. I cannot think of anything more than that, because even in this case, I'm not sure what is going to happen about seasonality or cyclicity. I can only comment about the trend. I took an example here, which was a very, very simple, you can also say bogus example, but somehow related to the pandemic situation which we have right now. So I can comment something about the trend, something I can comment, right? But I cannot really comment anything about the seasonality or the cyclicity. That I cannot comment. So what is going to happen in the future related to seasonality or cyclicity, that I don't know. So I can still, I'm still not in a position to fix this model so that it gives me a very long term kind of a forecast. So I can still do, or I'm still limited to do short or medium level forecast. I'm still limited to do short and medium level forecast. Right? These are the two use cases that we saw. Now let's look at the third use case. I have my time series. Let's look at case three. Case three is where, right? Case three is where now this becomes interesting. Trend is there and seasonality is there. Both are there. Both are true, let's say. Okay? Both are true. Irrespective of whether the trend is uptrend or downtrend, right? I really don't know what are the properties of seasonality, but it is there. It's there in the data. In this case, I can use a method which is known as Halt's Winters method. Halt's Winters exponential smoothing method. Right? This method will be able to do, okay, again, will be able to do short to medium term, short to medium term forecasts. Right? We will be able to do short to medium term forecasts in this case, right? Because I still don't know what is the nature of the seasonality or what is causing the seasonality. I don't know the root cause. That root cause might change also in future. In future, that root cause might change, right? And that's the reason why I cannot be 100% sure as to what I can do in case of long term. So you see, in all of these cases, case one, case two, case three, I'm only limited to do short. In case of case one, it is only limited to short. And in case two and case three, I'm able to do somehow short plus medium term. Right. Other than that, I'm really not able to do anything else. Right. I'm really not able to do anything else at all. Right. So this is what the gap is, or this is, you can say, what is the preliminary gap of the ETS models which you have. In case of ETS, you have some advantages, right? You have advantages in the sense that you can do a certain things in a very, very easy or straightforward way, like taking averages and so on, right? But there will be limitations. So how do we take care of these limitations? And even a better question here will be, while we were doing these activities like Halt's winter method and so on and so forth, what can we really do to improve the strategy, right? Right. So let's try to look into each of the methods first, right? Until this point in time, do you have any doubts?
No doubt.
Okay. So yeah, give me 1 minute. Just give me 1 minute. My pen has hanged. Okay. Yeah, this is working now. So let's try to look into this from a different kind of a perspective using different names. So our basic concepts are clear. I can have multiple cases, case 1, case 2, case 3, where in this case I had a trend which is constant. Then in case 2 I had trend. In case 3 I had trend plus seasonality. And I was able to find out what methods I'm going to use. In this case, I'm going to use simple ETS. In this case, I'm going to do Holt's method. In this case, I'm going to do Holt's Winters method, right? So now let's try to break down what is really happening inside these methods, right? Let's start from the very traditional methods. The most easy and the most commonly used traditional method, okay, is what was used or what we saw in case of the simple ETS method. Take the average of the previous values. Take the average of the previous values and you simply output it. This is really not a very good kind of a solution because it does not scale into all of the scenarios, right? It really does not work in all of the scenarios. Now the statisticians came up with these kind of, let's say, Holt's methods and Holtz-Winter methods. What they tried to do is that they wanted to change this average to something which is weighted average or something which is also known as a moving average, right? Something, a method which is also known as moving average. How does a moving average work? Moving average works basis a delta value. Moving average works basis the delta value, which let's say I have some use case. Let's say I have some use case and I'm going to tell you what use case I have. And let's say my delta value for that use case is 3 months. I have some use case. Let's say my use case is to predict the sales of TV. And what I'm trying to do in case of moving average method is that what I'm trying to do in the moving average method is that because my delta is equal to 3 months, let's say I have prepared my data also in that way, right? I have prepared my data according to the scale of this delta. For example, the first value is that of 1st Jan, or this is for Jan. The next is for Feb, next is for March until the December one. So I want to know what is going to happen, or let's say this data belongs to 2020. Now I want to know what is going to happen in Jan 2021. So what do I do in this case is because delta is equal to 3, I go back 3 months, December, then I will be having November, and here I will be having October. So October some value was there, Y October. November some value was there, Y of November. December some value was there, Y of December. I take a sum of all these, divide by 3. I get the average and I put it for January. Right? This is a good method. But I have assumed over here there is no seasonality. Are you getting my point? This is related to Holt's method. This is not exactly Holt's method. Holt's method has a different mathematical function, which we are really not looking into because we can clearly see that there are limitations in the method. Although we do have Python functions to find this out or to implement them, but these are not really that much useful because as I have already told you, these are used in many of the cases for short-term cases, and for a very few cases, we can use it for the medium-term cases, right? So this is the reason why people came up or statisticians came up with this idea that let's take a moving average, right? The window is going to change. The reason why it is called moving average is because this window of 3 months is going to change. For example, tomorrow, if you want to predict my sales for February, and because you have a delta of 3, what will be the 3 months now? November, December, January. This is going to be your window, right? If next day or next month you're going to predict things for March, now your window becomes December, January, February. This becomes your new window, right? So this window is shifting, as you can see. This window is shifting with a value or with a depth, okay, with a depth of 3. So it is at least and at max having 3 values in that particular window, and then it is shifting, right? So in this kind of a way, I can do moving averages and I can find values. Now this method looks very simple, in some cases looks very silly, but I can assure you this is also a very powerful method. This is really a very powerful method for not so accurate but a very good governance kind of an estimation. Because if you know what basic stock traders do, especially the ones who are looking at day trading kind of things, then they extensively use this method of moving averages, right? They really use this method of moving averages, unless you tell me that they do have the software or machine learning capability to go beyond and see something more, right? What that something more means is that the statistician came up with a new method, which is also known as seasonal naive method. Okay, seasonal naive method. What the seasonal naive method says is that if, let's say, I have seasonality in my data, let's say I've already detrended it, okay, and this is my 1 year of data. This is the next 1 year of data. This is the second year of data. Okay, this is the third year of data, and so on and so forth. So until this point in time, it was 1 year. Until this point in time, it is 2. Until this point in time, it is 3. And every year I see a peak in my AC sales. For example, this data belongs to air conditioning sales. Obviously, I know what is the logical reason behind it. It is because of the summer season. In the summer season, there will be a lot of sales, right? So I can take an average of what has happened in this peak. I take an average of what has happened in this peak, or even better, let's take an actual value. And I say that this actual value has a very high chance, or there is a very high chance of this value to repeat in next year also. So if in the year 2020, I have on an average in the summer season sold, okay, sold 5 ACs per day, right? Or let's say 35 ACs per week, right? Then there is a very good chance that 35 ACs per week will also be sold in the year 2021. Why this method is naive is because, you see, practically, again, I can take you back to that COVID-19 offline shop example. It is very clear that if my shop was online, if I was selling my ACs in Amazon.com, yes, then it is really possible for any customer like you to book the ACs from Amazon.com, because lockdown or no lockdown, I will be getting the deliveries. I'm still getting the deliveries irrespective of what is the situation in my city, right? Yes, there was a complete lockdown phase in our country also, but in that case also, even if the delivery was late, we never saw a situation whereby we ordered something from Amazon or Flipkart and it did not get delivered to us. So for people who are running businesses like offline shops, this is not a good idea. And that is the reason why this is called a naive method, because it does not, okay, does not fit to everyone, right? It does not fit to every scenario. Why? Because it is not taking care of confounding variables. It is not taking care of confounding variables like pandemic. If there is a pandemic, then this entire idea is going to change, that every year I'm going to have an average of 35 ACs per week sale, at least in the summer season, right? So that's where the problems have cropped up. So let's try to understand what this is really meaning. I hope you got the point, right? What we are trying to do over here, we're just trying to find out, right? We are just trying to find out what is, or what are the different kind of mathematical interpretations that we can do of these ways, or the mathematical ways to find out the time series, right? Before we close the session, let's try to quickly look into the mathematics quickly. I'm really sorry for this, but from an interview perspective, the mathematical side of things are really also important. So let's quickly look at the mathematics. Autoregressive method. Simple enough, but it does have a mathematical representation as well. And that mathematical representation is given as any value that I'm trying to predict, y at time t, right, is given as some value mu. I'm going to define what that is, plus sum of I to p, right? Sum of I is equal to 1 to p, let's say. Y of I multiplied by y of t minus I plus some error term at the given time t, right? Let's try to define what these are. This, oh, sorry, a very wrong color. This mu over here is a constant value. I'm taking up a constant value just like my linear regression problem. If you remember what we used to do in case of linear regression, we used to do beta 0 plus beta 1 x1 plus beta 2 x2 plus until beta n xn. This you can really call as a constant. And then at the end, we also used to add some errors. So you can call this E part is the error. Okay, we can call this E part is the error. This mu is basically constant of something unknown. Some unknown effects which will be there in my time series, which I really cannot define. It is not really possible for anyone to mathematically define what kind of changes will be introduced in my time series, in my data, in my sales because of some factor which I do not control. So I need to have a constant in place, right, which you can call as the intercept, right? So this was the intercept in case of the regression problems, and then all the other components were the slopes or the coefficients. So this constant will be there, and then what I'm trying to do is very, very simple. I'm taking a weighted average. You see, I'm taking a weighted average of any value of y at any given point in time I, and I'm trying to multiply it from the previous one. So this is the current value at any given time, and this is the old value. So this is what we are trying to do in case of autoregressive methods, or this is also known as an autoregression model. Autoregression model. Okay, this is known as an autoregression model. We have other ways also. We have seen what is the average model, right? We have looked into what is my moving average thing, right? Moving average, I'll again quickly come back because there is a mathematical equation here. We have looked into the seasonal naive approach, right? This is really not scalable at various different kinds of time, especially in our time because things are changing like crazy. So autoregression, right? Autoregression is a model, you can say, is that this is kind of a model, you can say, which is going to take care of your trend as well as it takes care of the errors using a weighted average method, using the concepts of weighted average. I'm not going to say it is a direct application of this weighted average because I'm not doing any division over here, right? So I'm not taking any average by means of how many number of entities I have over here, or otherwise I would have had something in the denominator, right? So there is nothing in the denominator. That's why it's not really a direct application of this weighted average thing, but it's taking into consideration what is the current value and what is the previous value, but also considering the error, right? Also considering the error, right? So that's the first way, that's the first thing which you can say, right? Now there is a very important, no, I'll say just a mathematical expression, let's say, of, let's say, I'll just change the color. And the second mathematical expression that we need to know is that of the moving averages. Let's try to define what is going to be the mathematical representation of moving average, right? You will come to know by the next session, by tomorrow, why we did this, because now we are going to combine in next class. What we are going to do, we are going to combine the power of AR and ML, and then we are going to come up with methods like ARMA and ARIMA. So ARIMA is basically, as I said, it is a composition, or it is a composite of the previous methods that we are going to learn. So these are the methods. Okay, so AR we have looked into. Let's look into MA. So what is MA is that to find any value of y at a given point in time t, I simply take that constant value mu, right? I take the constant value mu, I add it with the error at time t, and then I take a summation. I take a summation of I equal to 1 to q. Q are all the data points which I have of some coefficient theta I, right? And I multiply that by the error at t minus I, where theta, right? This theta value, right? This theta value is basically the coefficient at time t, right? At any given time, at a given point in time. So this is a very complex thing to understand right now, but what essentially we are trying to do is we are trying to consider something which is a constant value. We are trying to consider something which is the error value. Errors can be there. And then using this expression, what we are trying to find out is that if I have a delta, so you can consider this theta as the delta. So if I have a delta value of 3, just like the example which I took, what is going to be the window, right? What is going to be the window which is going to be moving, right? Which is going to be moving so that I can find a value at a given point in time t, looking at the values at the last n points, right? Looking at the values at the last n points, can I try to find the value which will be there at a given time in future, right? So that is the moving window concept which we had over here, which is incorporated in this summation part of the equation. Okay. Now what we are going to do is that we are simply going to introduce the lags. We are going to introduce the lags, and according to the lags, we will be able to find, okay, we will be able to find how much uh, uh, is going to be the forecast, right? So for example, if I replace q with 3, so in this case, if I replace q with 3, right, I'm going to go back to 3 lags in the past, which means that if I have data for November, December, January, and then I'm trying to predict something for February, taking into consideration the last 3 months, right? Taking into consideration the last 3 months, right? I can simply fix the value of q equal to 3 also, right? And in this case, I'm going to call it the lag or the delta. And hence I will be able to approximate the value of y, taking into consideration the constants and the error, right? So that is the objective over here, right? Now, we are going to combine the power of AR and MA, and then we are going to look into advanced things, let's say related to AR, MA, and ARIMA, and so on and so forth. But until this point in time, are there any questions which you have? It's not really important to remember the math, right? It's really not important to remember the math. It is more important to remember why we have a constant, why we have taken into consideration a constant and an error and a lag in this case. So is it
No questions as of now.
great? Great. Thank you so much. Then let's do one thing. Then let's close the session for today. We'll meet again tomorrow, and then we'll try to combine these things that we have learned, and then we will carry on.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, Rohit.
Thanks, Mamik. Thanks. Good night.
Good night.